Welcome to Succeed with Shanice, a podcast about keeping it real and helping you thrive in every aspect of your professional journey. I am Shanice the CEO, sharing my unique perspective as a Black woman in HR and business ownership, and spotlighting conversations where BIPOC experiences in the workplace are shared, valued, and celebrated. Hey, Succeeders, welcome back to another episode of Succeed with Shanice. I'm Shanice the CEO, and if you've ever wondered how to handle workplace conduct challenges, whether you're a leader trying to set expectations or an employee navigating team dynamics, you are in the right place. Today, we're going to break down the differences between conduct and performance, common workplace challenges, and how managers can create a culture of accountability without micromanaging. So grab your tea or your coffee, or if you're driving, keep your hands on the wheel. But tune in and let's get into the topic today. So picture this. You're leading a team and you've got an employee who is always a few minutes late. Their work is solid, but their tardiness affects morning meetings and team morale. Do you address it or do you just let it slide? Workplace conduct is pretty tricky because some behaviors don't directly affect job performance, but they do impact professionalism, team culture, and accountability. Plus, workplace expectations are evolving. What was standard 20 years ago isn't necessarily the norm today. So how do we as leaders and managers strike that balance? Well, that's what I want to talk with you about today. And we'll dive deep into conduct and performance. What are some of the struggles we experience and how we can navigate these spaces with some key tools that I will be sharing with you in today's episode. So let's get into it. First, let's dive into conduct versus performance. There is this constant tug and pull or debate on what conduct is versus what performance is and how we address the two. So I want to give a definition that I give my leaders, but also that have helped me in leading teams as I navigate these spaces around conduct and performance. So performance is really all about the job duties. What are the duties that they're expected to do? And then the outcomes. What are they expected to achieve at the end of a period or their role or the position that they're in? Performance is really all about the job. What's in that job description, right? What are the duties? What are the deliverables? And then we're able to assess their performance based on those criteria. Now, this is very different from conduct. Conduct is something we're going to be diving into today, where it's all about the individual's behavior or their professionalism or how they interact with other employees within the workspaces. Conduct is all about the individual and how they show up in the spaces. And today, I want to dive into some of those conduct issues that we as leaders tend to struggle with to address in any given time within our places of work. As we think about struggles with addressing conduct and what some of those issues are, first, I want to highlight that sometimes we as leaders just have a challenge in addressing any type of conduct issues. And this can show up as fear of conflict. So we don't want to cause any adverse emotional interactions with our team members by addressing whatever that behavior is that the employee is maybe having a pattern with that may not adhere to workplace standards. So this fear tends to creep up on us in not wanting to be in conflict or just truly adverse to conflict altogether. Another struggle that we as leaders experience is lack of clear policies, whether our policies aren't detailed enough or don't fully outline what today's workplace could look like, really gives us as leaders challenges in being able to ensure our employees adhere to those policies. Because honestly, if we don't understand them, how can we expect our employees to understand them? And I'll get to that point later on in this conversation. But really think about those times where we as a leader tend to struggle to address conduct issues, all because our policies may not have been clear enough for us to point back to. And then there is the big generational differences that we all are experiencing in our workplaces today and in the past maybe 5 to 8 years, where we have 5 different generations that exist in these spaces, and they each come with their own experiences, their own ideals, and their own expectations of what the workplace should be and how it should exist. So, recognizing as leaders that sometimes having those generational differences can be challenging to be able to have the conversations necessary or make any corrective actions as it relates to conduct. I know I spoke with a leader maybe not too long ago where they were concerned about dress code issues within their team. And they recognize that there is a generational difference or perception there in what professional attire can look like. And also, while folks are ensuring that they show up as their authentic self. And so they didn't want to necessarily hinder anyone from self expression, but they saw that there was some concerns on if whether or not the dress code adhered to some of the standards that the workplace had set. So I ask you as managers, what have you ever have you ever felt maybe unsure or unclear about whether to address an employee about their attire or just kind of let it slide because they wear what they want to wear? I've heard they wear what they can afford, right? Because it could be a bit of a challenge to ask someone about how their attire is or how they're dressing or how they just present themselves. And so I want to hear from you all in the comments. Have you ever felt this, again, tug and pull or this struggle in being able to address attire as it relates to conduct issues within your workplace? So, as we have highlighted some of the things that we struggle with as leaders in being able to navigate workplace conduct challenges, I want to break down some core issues that tend to occasionally pop up more regularly than others that we all actually may be familiar with, what they look like, and also how we can potentially respond to them should they come up again. Because I really encourage these conversations that we have on this podcast to be a good dialogue, but also lessons learned for myself and for you all. So here are 3 areas or 3 core issues that I've identified as the most prevalent in the workspaces that we exist in today. The first one is punctuality. So time and attendance, right? Where punctuality, there is this sense or this expectation, not even expectation, there is this assumption that everyone knows the common definition of what being punctual is in the spaces that we work in. And this assumption sometimes isn't common knowledge across the board. So instead of having these assumptions, I think shifting our expectations in being very clear on what those expectations are as it relates to attendance is very important. Prime example, We all are probably or have experienced or currently experiencing remote work or flexible work schedules, right? So sometimes we as leaders struggle with remote work because we can't necessarily see folks arrive in the office when they're remote. So we start to maybe question whether or not they did start on time at 9 a.m. behind their computer in whatever space that they're in. So being able to get past that expectation, they have to be behind their computer at 9, and being more willing to just set clear guidelines of what that looks like. And if the guideline is, yes, check in on Slack with a greeting at 9 a.m. and building that into your culture, I think is a better way to tackle some of the challenges we may experience when it comes to assessing punctuality. But we want to be reasonable, right? We want to set reasonable accommodations around what attendance and punctuality looks like within our workspaces. So make sure to, as you're setting whatever those clear guidelines are, whether it's checking in on the Slack or being at the first meeting of the day, being at 10 a.m. And so, as long as everyone's there at the meeting at 10 a.m. via Zoom or whatever means you use, that is the expectation and it's very clear and defined, I think is a good way to combat this piece of or this issue around punctuality that tends to creep up ever so often because we're in varying work formats. Another one, as I prefaced before, that I see keeps reoccurring is attire. I think it's really important that we balance professionalism with personal expression. I am a big believer that everyone should be able to show up as their full authentic self in their workspace where it is within the realms of whatever that standard is for that organization. So ensuring that professionalism again is defined, whether it's in a clear dress code policy or code of conduct, but balancing what that definition is with ensuring that folks can show up as who they are. There are cultural differences, there are religious differences. So being able to ensure that whatever that dress code policy, however it's written, is able to encompass all of those differing perspectives and cultures and representations. Also ensuring that it's adaptable. With anything else, like time, things change. Like I said, that we have 5 generations now in any given workspace, showing up with their varying cultures and experiences and backgrounds and expectations. So when attire comes into play, I'm sure some of my more seasoned generations remember dress codes where women were only allowed to wear blouses and skirts that went below their knees, and they must have a hosiery under those said skirts. Men probably suit and or button up shirt with a tie and slacks. These have since changed. And again, those I'm not discounting those forms of standards because they fit where they're supposed to, but being able to set standards and policies that are able to adapt with the times helps to ensure that you have a more inclusive and a more welcoming work environment. While, of course, again, staying in adherence to whatever your standard is as it relates to your maybe organization's brand or reputation in that regard. So being able to respond to the attire issue, I think comes when you really have this balance between and clear expectation of what professionalism is with personal expression being allowed and supported within that space. And then my third point is accountability. And this one really speaks for itself, but really it's just holding employees accountable. And sometimes that can be hard because, again, back to balancing. That's what we as leaders do. We are the kings and queens of balancing things out. But balancing, holding them responsible without micromanaging them. Because more likely than not, your best or high performing individuals do not like to be micromanaged in any way. They enjoy the independence, they thrive in the independence. And most importantly, they feel like they have ownership for the work that they are doing and ownership in who they are in the space that they're doing their work. So allow that. Establish this culture of ownership and independence while ensuring that you have appropriate things in place to be able to hold them accountable for some of the work that they are responsible for. So, we dived into the definition of what conduct is versus performance. This podcast episode is really about the conduct and how we can navigate some of those core issues that come up when it ties to conduct, such as accountability, punctuality, and attire or dress code. So, I want to next dive into how we as leaders, based on our own perspectives, tend to get really stuck in where we can maybe address or not some of these issues. One place where we get stuck is our own personal biases. Differing generations has been one of the biggest trending topics out there. So much research and articles and webinars about how we navigate this space with multiple generations being present. And what I have found in these spaces is that personal biases tend to creep in a very major way. So, as managers, it is our duty to start recognizing what those biases are. Yes, we all have differing views on what work ethic is and what professionalism is, and understanding that those are our personal views and learning what their views are as well. So then you can build this cohesive ecosystem within your team that supports both and speaks to both and navigates within all the differing bias perspectives. So recognizing our own personal biases helps us to really inform ourselves in how we could respond to any conduct issues that may arise. Another thing is assumptions versus clear expectations. Let's get real, managers. Sometimes we see something or we learn of something, and the first thing that we do is assume. We assume they're not engaged. We assume they don't care about their job. We assume that they're just not working and they're doing something else. And these assumptions can hinder, one, us learning what the real issue is, but also two, in us being able to respond to these conduct issues in a way that is, again, not biased, but also is supportive of our employee. So we can combat this by setting clear expectations. Are your rules clearly communicated, and are they clearly communicated in a way that everyone understands and buys into them? Or is everyone just like, yep, that's the handbook, it's in the handbook, I don't know what the handbook says, but it's understood that we just don't do that? Embrace a culture that allows folks to ask why. And I envision like toddlers where they get to a point where they ask why about everything. But why this? But why that? In that process, the toddler is not just, because we're assuming they're being annoying, but the toddler is not being annoying, but it's adding more variables and understanding of why the space that they're in is the way that it is, or why the sky is blue and the grass is green. Like, it really builds this framework around them for them to have a clear and connected understanding of why the things are the way that they are. So, not to compare our employees to toddlers, but in the mindset of a toddler, in that build this space so everyone, including ourselves as leaders, can ask why to some of the rules and standards that we have in place, because that also establishes us to be able to grow, but also our organization to grow and to adapt with the times. So, setting clear expectations and communicating them in a space where the question of why is welcomed, I think is very important. And the last point, area that we tend to get stuck in as managers and leaders of our organizations, is avoiding the conduct issue altogether. It's not the best rule of thumb. I always recommend to any of my leaders to at least address the issue, because when we avoid it, it causes bigger problems. And more likely than not, it starts to affect that individual's performance or the team's performance. And it makes it harder down the line to go back and correct it. So, avoiding some of these areas where an employee might be using unprofessional language in the office, or avoiding issues where team members have complained about an employee's behavior and how it's maybe causing tension, really doesn't help in one addressing the issue, but most of all, fixing it. By avoiding it, you're causing it to grow and fester into bigger things that we probably all do not want to deal with. So take that time to really dissect what the issue is, and then do your best to address it and not get stuck in being very conflict adverse in the process. So you're probably wondering, well, Shanice, this is all great. Yes, I recognize my biases. I'm starting to set clear expectations, and I don't want to avoid the conduct. The problem is I don't know how to address it. So what do I do? Well, I am so glad you asked, because I have some key strategies you can actually start implementing to address some of these issues, whether they're current issues, or to prepare you for any issues that may arise and mitigate the impact of them. I don't think this can completely eradicate conduct issues, because we are all human. Things happen. But I do believe that if you implement these key things, these key strategies, you will be able to build a culture that doesn't necessarily nurture bad conduct, but it actually does the complete opposite in building a culture of inclusivity, but also a culture of less challenges. So the first strategy is policy and expectations. I'm always going to start with the handbook first, and what expectations and standards are we setting first? Are your workplace guidelines clear? And are they regularly communicated? That is the first step that you can take, and very easy, right? That you can take to ensure that you're setting the groundwork, setting the foundation of what your workplace conduct could look like, or that you desire it to look like. So, setting those policies and making sure they're clear, reasonable, and adaptable is very important. And then regularly communicating that, whether that's in team meetings, in retreats, in one on ones with individuals. You can even add it to your job posting or part of your onboarding experience. So folks are coming into your workplace already understanding this is the conduct of our workplace. This is our culture. This is how we show up. This is what's acceptable versus what is not acceptable. First, ensuring that those are clear to you and clearly outlined helps to then regulate any type of conduct issues that may arise. Second, a second strategy is coaching versus correcting. Now, I believe both should exist in any workplace, regardless of what industry you're in. As a leader, you should have the tools to be able to coach your employees and to correct your employees. And you should be able to know when one is appropriate more than the other. I always say, rule of thumb, if you are correcting an individual more than you are coaching them to be successful, we have a problem. So, having these informal discussions on a regular basis and coaching your team or your members around how they should show up and what their work should look like, I think is very important and should happen regularly. So, coaching should happen regularly, daily, monthly, so on and so forth. Whereas correcting should be when an issue occurs and addressed at a timely fashion. So you correct in that moment. You don't wait until the next one on one or wait until the next team meeting or wait until the retreat. You should be correcting in that moment when the issue arises and when you are ready, because you will be ready, but when you are also ready with the necessary information to back it up. Because correcting is more so an escalated issue that you don't want to get escalated any further or fester and become a bigger problem, right? So, again, navigating both really also helps in building workplace conduct that supports the vision that you have for you and your team. So, coaching regularly, but correcting as needed is the rule of thumb. Third, I do, and I love this topic. It's a topic that comes up a lot when I work with leaders and when I research about just being in leadership, and that's having cultural competencies. You being able to understand the workplace shifts that are happening both on a macro level and then micro within your workspace, I think is very important because you want to be able to move and adapt and be flexible with those shifts while still maintaining standards. So, yes, back to that balancing act that we love to do as leaders, because again, you want to still have a foundation to grow upon, but you should be able to, the foundation should allow you to be able to move and shift as needed based on whatever changes in culture and dynamics and needs that need to happen within your workspace. So, as a leader, understanding your workplace shifts while maintaining standards will really help to navigate these spaces that we are in, especially as we're looking to mitigate any workplace conduct that is challenging our productivity. And then lastly, but most importantly, if you don't do anything else, if you choose not to look at your policies and set your expectations, if you're not coaching as much and trying or very adverse to correcting, if you don't even want to think about cultural competency, I hope you lead by example. Leading by example is the pretty much the heart of all of this work when we think about managing conduct within our teams. We should show up the way we are asking, requesting, expecting our team to show up. So we should be modeling the very behavior and habits that we want to see them do. And it helps not just because they can see it in action, but you are showing that you too have bought into this culture that you're trying to cultivate within your workspace. So, leading by example is very important in ensuring that all of this comes together. Because you can write a policy, right? You can write a policy around being punctual, but you go as a leader I don't know, through your morning routine and don't get into the office until noon. Meanwhile, you're telling everyone else they have to be there by 9. That was a very interesting example, but all that to say, if you are expecting your team to be timely, you too should be timely. Better example, you as a leader have set a team meeting for 10 o'clock and you don't show up, whether it's in Zoom or in the physical conference room, until maybe 10:20. Well, now you're setting an expectation because what your team's going to do is they're going to go back to their desks and be like, okay, boss doesn't come in until 10:20, so we don't have to be there till like 10:15. We're good. We can go mosey on in when we feel like it. And it'll be that moment when you desperately need everyone to be there at 10 for a high ticket or high priority deliverable. And because you set through your actions, set this expectation that we don't necessarily start until 15 minutes of the time we set, you're there by yourself at 10 o'clock. And you don't want that. And that starts to harbor, going back to the assumptions. Well, no one's paying attention, or no one's listening, or no one respects my authority. Assumptions, right? When really they were just following your lead. So setting or ensuring that you are leading by example makes or breaks everything that I just discussed in this episode. So I hope these strategies are helpful. Again, leading by example, understanding cultural differences and shifting with them while maintaining the standards, coaching versus correcting, and when those should actually happen, and then setting policies and expectations that are clear and regularly communicated. Because this workplace that we are all in and existing in is evolving. And as leaders and managers, we need to be more adaptable and firm in our standards. So conduct matters just as much as performance does when it comes to fostering a very healthy work environment. So I want to hear from you. How have you navigated workplace conduct challenges? What worked and what didn't work as well as you thought it would? I would love to hear from you. So go ahead and put those in the comments or use the link in these notes to my email and message me. I love to hear all the things that you are experiencing. And if you implement any of the strategies that I've shared today, let me know how they went. I really want to know how you are leading by example or how you are coaching more often than you are correcting your team. Or you looked at your handbook and was like, we got to make this just a little bit more clear so folks can understand it better. And then how did you go out and disseminate and communicate that? I want to hear from you. So go ahead and put your messages in the comments or use the link in this post and email me for a quick conversation. And if you're struggling right now, as you're going to your desk or about to go into your next meeting, and while listening to this, you thought of maybe one or two experiences where you're like, oh, I need some backup here. I need some help, whether that's with your workplace policies or just overall your team dynamics. Let's connect. You can book a strategy call with me, and together we can unpack these challenges. So the link to my strategy call is in the show notes. And I hope to hear from you because we don't have to do any of this leadership work alone. And I'm here to provide any tools and support to you as you navigate your team dynamics. So that's my time. Thank you, Succeeders, for tuning in to Succeed with Shanice. Until next time, I hope you keep leading with intention and overall success. And tune in to the next episode where we'll dive deeper into what leadership and workplace and overall success looks like for us. Thank you and see you soon.